Thanks. The next speaker is not yet arrived, so the next speaker, Tushar, is not here, so it's architect Prem Chandawardkar. His course material is Art Appreciation. It's a second semester course. It's on page 22 of the syllabus.
A little over 3 weeks ago, Bharat Gaura came and met me in my office to persuade me to take part in this event. And I must say, Bharat, I'm amazed at how you have been the persuasive force behind this event and the energy and time you have put into talking to each one of us to participate in this, make this happen, and this collection of opinion and openness to ideas is really something unprecedented. And I can only hope the energy you have put in reaps a collective. I can only hope the energy you have put in reaps a collective energy from all of us that will carry this forward. And perhaps the most valuable thing I can do today is to stand here and publicly commit that energy on my part. But anyway, Bharat came to me and he showed me this syllabus, and he said, we are keeping design for a later event, and the rest of the subjects, you can choose any subject you want. But I think if you chose art appreciation, it would, you do a good job of it. So I said, okay, why not? And then I started thinking maybe there's an unspoken subtext that Bharat is not quite saying. And that subtext is, please do art appreciation because no one else will do it. So maybe that's some over-analysis on my part, but since the thought had entered my head, I sort of skimmed through the syllabus book like that, doing a sort of quick graphic analysis. One subject on each page, which were the pages that had the largest amount of blank white space on them. And I found that there were elective one in 8th semester, first semester workshop, and art appreciation. And I won't get into an interpretation of what that means. But staring at these few words sparingly congregated on this largely blank page that constituted the art appreciation syllabus, I realized that they were so general they could mean anything. And I felt like the Queen in Lewis Carroll's Alice Through the Looking Glass, who said, why are you so bothered about what a word means? I can make it mean anything I like. And I thought, yeah, that's a good approach. I can make art appreciation mean whatever I like. So that has led me to stand here and propose something highly radical, which is to say that there's an established convention for teaching art appreciation, not just in India, but all over the world. And the first thing we should do is tear it up and throw it away. Because that approach takes an overly intellectual approach instead of a common sense approach. And that intellectualism has complicated the issue so much that the dominating question is no longer what is beautiful or even what moves me, it's become what is art. So I'm not familiar with the one reference book this syllabus names, which is Humanities Through the Arts by David Martin and Lee Jacobus. But I looked it up, and the blurb on the back cover that is reproduced on Amazon says that this book continues to explore the humanities with an emphasis upon the arts as an expression of cultural and personal values. This beautifully illustrated text helps students learn how to actively engage a work of art. So this notion that art stands for something and you have to uncover what that means. You also said in the beginning, Ayn Rand said that art is the concretization of philosophy. And that's not something I agree with. I'm afraid, I beg to differ with you. Yeah. But you chose that quotation, which meant it was your belief too. But what it's saying, okay, art expresses cultural and personal values. There's a philosophy of the artist, there's a cultural context, and therefore that's the meaning in the artwork. And it's almost like the work itself is some fog you must penetrate to perceive the truth behind it. And that process of how you penetrate that fog is a process, sophisticated thing that the student must learn. And that's what art appreciation is all about. So, and a consequence of this kind of approach has led to another common misperception about art, that it is a luxury. It exists in the rarefied worlds of galleries, museums, art collections, and such like, and these are all moneyed spaces. So art is this luxury, this icing on the cake, and after one has resolved the basic struggles for food, clothing, and shelter, then if one has some money left over, one can indulge in art. And these questions are important because architecture is an art too, and you see that many of us trying to argue with government bureaucrats, for example, have come across the same attitude to architecture. The funny thing is, anyone in the Indian context should immediately realize this is untrue, because you see around us that the societies whose struggle for survival is most precarious are most embedded in art. Rural societies, tribal societies, every person is an artist there. In my house, if I want a rangoli pattern drawn on my doorstep in Diwali, no one in my family of my social economic level will know how to do it. We have to ask the maid servant to do it. I'm sure all of you have been through similar things. In a village, if they made a coconut scraper, it was not just a functional machine. They made it symbolize some force, like the trunk of an elephant. There was no separation made between an object of use and an object of contemplation. The two work together. So I think we have to really fundamentally re-examine this question of what art is. Is it really to express a cultural and personal value that existed before the work of art was created, and which the art just serves to express? And I found a clue in an unlikely source, a statement by a British writer called Jeanette Winterson. And she said, "The question, 'What is your book about?' has always puzzled me. It is about itself, and if I could condense it into other words, I should not have taken such care to choose the words I did." And I think that art is about itself is actually a very fundamental thing. Why do you have to say there's this truth? If you are in a room with a work of art, why do you have to say there's some truth like a cultural value, philosophy, and artist that's outside the room? Actually, all of us as artists, when we complete our work and we hand it into the public realm, it no longer belongs to us. It has a life of its own, and we have to be willing to let go of it. And art as itself, art has its value because of its form. It has exactitude, it has precision. And this stands in opposition to the mess of everyday life where things keep changing, where guideposts keep shifting. And because of that, art can serve as this reference point where we can look at art and use it to say, who am I? What am I? Where am I? So, the village woman who remains embedded with the knowledge of how to draw rangoli does so because that rangoli is a symbol of the cosmos she inhabits. It is a way of understanding that cosmos and her identity in relationship to it. And she does not delegate an understanding of the universe like we do to a specialist like a scientist or a philosopher. She uses art. So there is nothing beyond the relationship between the viewer and the art. It has nothing to do with the intentions of the artist. And the first point in teaching art appreciation is to make sure this relationship between viewer and art is not undermined by some expectation of sophisticated interpretation. It's a common sense, intuitive approach. So the first thing we must do when we teach art appreciation is to inculcate in the student a faith in their own intuition, a faith in themselves to react to art. That how we learn that this is what it is. And it's actually an intuitive power of recognition beyond our capacity to describe. There's a famous case in the US Supreme Court on pornography. And someone had filed a case against an art film that was also highly erotic. And all the standard words to define pornography like nudity and sexuality also applied to this, but this was clearly an art film. And the judge who was judging the case heard all these arguments back and forth about, who was presiding over the case, all these arguments back and forth about trying to define it. And in the end he said, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And this is not it. So that intuitive recognition that we have is something, that is the starting point of appreciating art, what we relate to. And why do we get distorted and moved away from this? It's because actually within certain circles we breed a self-referential culture. Like for example, as architects, when we try and judge what we do, our work has intangible dimensions. So how do we assess it? So we depend on social validation. We say, okay, does it win design awards? Does it get published in the reputed journals? Does it win design competitions? Is it discussed seriously in the reputed schools of architecture? And these are all judgments made by our peers, by other architects. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when it becomes a dominant mode of validation, it breeds a self-referential culture where architects are really designing for other architects. And it's the same thing in the world of art. There's a self-referential language amongst art critics and amongst art collectors. And just because that is the language that gets published in the highbrow magazines doesn't mean that is what art is. We don't have faith in our intuitive reactions because we say they are probably subjective, but they are not. Christopher Alexander and his group at Berkeley did an interesting experiment. They took photographs, each photograph contained a pair of objects, and they showed it to people, and they showed it to two groups, and the groups were demographically very similar. But they asked them a different question. The first group, they asked, which one do you like better? Which is an intellectual question. And there was a tremendous idiosyncrasy and subjectivity. But the second group, they said, which one feels more a part of yourself? Which one makes you feel more naturally whole and complete? And there would be a 95% correlation with one of the objects in the pair. So people would choose the wooden handle hammer over the plastic handle screwdriver. They choose the hand-painted cup versus the gaudy printed mug. They would choose the street with trees to the street without trees, even though the street without trees might have had some funky buildings on it. So when you try and judge things experientially, there is actually great objectivity and consensus. We all laugh at the same things, we all cry over the same things. If there wasn't that consensus and objectivity, we wouldn't be able to relate to each other. So judge things experientially, and you don't have that problem of subjectivity. So we teach our students faith in their own intuitive reactions, asking them to judge experientially. And we should not start with the historic past and work our way forward. We should start with the contemporary because that's where the experience is, and work our way backward. So we should start with the local rather than the distant, and the starting point must be the student's own concrete experience. Travel to local museums and galleries, go beyond the highbrow world of art for art's sake, visit craft centers and even the lowbrow world containing quiche and calendar art. And the students should say, how do I look at this and assess who I am? And they should articulate their reaction in class. And then they share their reactions with each other. You teach them not to start with the conviction that their own interpretation is authentic and to be defended against others. They just put it out there into the common space of the classroom. And in that space, they discovered sometimes that their reactions find resonances in the reactions of others. And if they find those common resonances, then they're onto something authentic. It's like when two of us have a conversation and we are both moved by something in that conversation, then we realize that that something is something that is greater than either you or me. And we realize that's the foundation of authenticity. So authenticity is actually discovered through conversation. And then, after they found these first foundations of authenticity, they move beyond the local to the distant and the historical. And in that movement, they search for what has endured across both space and time. And in that endurance, they find a further dimension of authenticity. They can then, you lead them to the discovery of the principles of composition by which a work of art can have a directness of expression, yet allow multiple and complex readings through its hierarchies of scale, depth, layering, and ambiguity. You ask them to analyze the qualities in a work of art that facilitate its subsequent appropriation by a viewer, because that's really what happens. And in each of these discussions, you seek to stay connected to how the students use these works of art to find out things not just about art, but about themselves. To all this, it is necessary that a teacher does not enter the classroom with a predefined notion of art appreciation that must be transferred to the student, but should have the ability to guide and channelize the discussion that the students have in the classroom. Pedagogy is important here. It's an untouched subject so far in today's discussion. And a pedagogy that enlivens a classroom is when the subject is placed on the table as a thing that is greater than anyone in the room, and both student and teacher approach it from their own perspective. There's an unfortunate thing I find in this syllabus, that it doesn't coincide with courses in art, the production of art. When I was a student of architecture, I had art every semester until the third year, and it ended in the final term of third year with an art thesis. And I think that was a great part of my training, and that's something that we should address. And how can you teach art appreciation without teaching art? A final word on assessment. Realizing the broader goal which should apply to every course, that assessment should not be treated as judgment or certification, but is actually a constructive feedback loop for improving future performance. So there are many subjects, but art appreciation is definitely one of them that should not be an examination. That's the wrong process. It should actually be a series of short analysis exercises, each of them carrying a small amount of marks. And each of these exercises can be so small and so quick, they can be given in one class, and the student brings it to the next class. And so there's a feedback loop also that starts to happen from class to class, and you can take a representative sample of assignments and discuss them at the start of every class. And I would suggest that there is one major assignment which is a term paper of say 1500 words or so, which is 1500 to 2000 words somewhere. We can talk about the length which is done at the end of the course. But finally, the ultimate aim of the course is to inculcate in the student a relationship with art that is not detached, highbrow and intellectual, but one that is intuitive, intimate and personal, and that a continued engagement with art on this basis develops an increase in sensitivity that paves the path to self-discovery. Thank you.